Morning, everyone, and welcome back to our podcast for this week. As usual, it's myself, Maritz, Van den Jiffen, Andrea Lazari, and today we're talking about grid collapse, which is much more up Andrea's street, as it were. So, Andrea, tell us what is grid collapse, and how is it different from load shedding?
Yeah, thanks, Mo, and well done on the intro on today's video.
Thank you.
But don't think you can take my job in this podcast just yet. Okay, so grid collapse. When we talk about grid collapse, it's a complete failure of Eskom to provide electricity to the nation, or even in this case, the province, but whole scale, so all at once. It's a complete shutdown of the electric grid. And the problem with that is because the grid functions at a minimum level of hertz, it has to build back up to that level before the power will come back. And that could take anywhere from 10 to 30 days, hopefully. There's only been one working example in America that we know of, and that was a full 14 days before they could get the grid back up and running. Why this is important to us is obviously it is become a risk factor in our country. Not a great factor, but the fact that it's on the radar has forced all the insurers to react to it. And I don't know if anyone's received communication. If not, they will shortly, to say that there is a change in the wording to their policies when it comes to grid failure. And yeah, today we're just gonna cover a bit of those words.
Yeah, and I think it's quite important. And before we get into that, I mean, you're seeing more and more news coming out from the investment side where, load shedding is already impacting certain industries more than others. I mean, the poultry industry is one that's been devastated because their margins are so thin, and others as well. But obviously, what we're going to talk about today is specifically in terms of how people's asset protection works, or in layman's terms, the short-term insurance. And yeah, I think let's start with that. In general, how did it work before these changes have been put through, and how's it going to work moving forward?
Okay, well, we got to split it out between your commercial insurance policies and your private insurance policies, because they work differently for obvious reasons. On the commercial side, your biggest risk there and the biggest thing that's been impacted by the change, obviously, your business interruption cover. So ordinarily, if you were insured for business interruption and you had your utilities on there, obviously a lack of electricity would institute a business interruption. You can't be active in your service delivery because there's no electricity, in which case your insurance policy would pay out whatever you're insured for, depending on your waiting periods and everything. But essentially that's the idea there. That's been impacted 100% by this. So and look, it does vary insurer to insurer with regards to the scope at which they're looking at it with. But all in all, it seems like a grid failure has become excluded from an insurable event in regards to business interruption. So if it's with some insurers, if it's just a normal outage, the transformer's blown or whatever, and that's impacted your business, there may still be cover. Some insurers have excluded that also. So you just gotta make yourself aware of the wording in your policy, chat to your advisor, and see that you are insured correctly. But for now, from what I can see, all the communication coming through, almost all the insurers have put in the exclusion for complete grid failure in regards to business interruption. On the home front, it's not as severe, but obviously everyone's got electronics in their house, and the two main changes that are coming in is lower limits and higher excesses for power surge claims, and that's obviously been coming through slowly because of all the load shedding we've been having. And then obviously the complete grid collapse. If you have a cold room at home, big deep freezers, most people store quite a bit of meat and food in their big chest freezers. Ordinarily, you could claim off that for extended load shedding or a grid collapse. That's been excluded mostly whole scale throughout everything. And the big one there is power surge. a lot of the insurers are changing the way they look at power surge. Some are excluding it completely because of the high level of claims they've been experiencing. So those are the two factors between commercial and domestic property that people need to be aware of.
Yeah, and I think what you said is quite important is that most of them are putting it through, but it's not all the same. Not all insurers are equal.
Yeah.
So, I mean, without naming any names, I take it there are some insurers that are on the extreme in terms of being quite punitive, and then on the other side, where they're still allowing for a fair bit of flexibility.
Yeah, and the wording can also be tricky. I got one this morning for instance, I'm obviously not going to mention the name, but they even included persistent load shedding as part of their total exclusion level. So, I mean, that basically voids the entire power surge section, because this whole year we've had nothing but persistent load shedding. Whereas other insurers specifically named grid collapse and grid collapse only. They
Yeah.
don't mention load shedding. They don't even mention your general blackout from a blown transformer or something like that. So it's very important that people need to get an expert on their side to do the work for them and make sure that their policy is covering their needs.
Yeah, yeah, very well said. And I think to echo that, I mean, I don't even know often how these things work, and I mean that's why we've got folk like you, on our side. And yeah, thanks for that, Andrea. I think that's a great discussion for today, and hopefully some people get something out of it. And yeah, thanks for tuning in, guys. Those that are listening, feel free to subscribe, hit the bell, and thanks for supporting us as we start in this little venture.
100%. Thanks, Mo. Thanks everyone for watching. If you enjoyed the content, please don't forget to give us a thumbs up and to subscribe to the channel. Just a disclaimer, these are our thoughts and opinions and not to be misconstrued as advice. Cheers.